Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
What a save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Rui Diaz through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Nico Ladero leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region! Seattle Sounders is campeón! I've scored! They've scored! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
Nice work on your little yacht thing.
And Portland can't say shit.
You know, what was the thought process in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder at Heart wrote a commentary that we didn't take Overcome seriously.
This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest. Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes on the Sounder at Heart podcast network. I am Jeremiah O'Shan. Joining me today is Charles Boehm once again. How are you doing, Charlie?
I'm well. It's such a pleasure to be back here.
Yeah, I know. It's like all of a sudden get you on all the time. But with the Club World Cup closing, you've been like our Club World Cup Club World Cup correspondent. So I just wanted to sort of close this circle a little bit.
Well, I wish that there had been more Sounders games involved in it. But you know, it kind of feels like, you know, we've been part of a grand human experiment, a human soccer capitalistic experiment the last month. And plenty to unpack.
There is, you know, it's funny. I have mixed feelings about how many more games I wanted the Sounders to play. I enjoyed the 3 games they were in immensely. Like, it was way more fun than I had anticipated. I thought the games themselves were entertaining. I thought the crowds were good. The atmosphere was good. The presentation I was probably most impressed by. But then after the Sounders got eliminated, I found myself somewhat disassociating with the tournament. Like, I was just not as plugged in as I kind of anticipated. Like, I did watch some games and I followed it and I knew what was going on, but I didn't make it. It wasn't appointment viewing for me or anything like that. And it helped that the Sounders, you know, are playing games again, and they, you know, so I have just other things to be worried about. But this whole tournament did feel, you know, you kind of alluded to it. It did feel a little surreal in that when you're there and you're watching it and you're seeing the games happen and you're seeing the crowds and you're seeing the presentation and you're in it, it feels like a real important tournament. Like, it felt big. It felt competitive. It felt, you know, like the soccer was played at a reasonably high level. Maybe not the highest level, but a high level. And then you pull back even just a little bit. And like yesterday, the final was a perfect example of this. You've got Donald Trump sitting in the stands. He's getting booed during the national anthem. And then he sort of forces his way onto the trophy stage. Apparently the trophy presentation was delayed 40 minutes so that he could be involved in it. And then Infantino is trying to, like, okay, you've done the presentation. Now let's let them do the trophy lift. And he's sort of trying to guide him off the stage. And Trump's like, no, what are you doing? I'm here. This is my thing. And it just gives this whole like icky vibe, right? Like, I don't know. Like, it was hard to get really into this thing. And you sort of wrote about this before the final. You talked about that you absolutely cringe situation where Juventus ends up going to the White House and Trump makes all these political remarks while Juventus is the backdrop. The players are standing behind him with no idea that he's about to do this stuff. And it's just like, I don't know. I don't know. How do you contextualize this all? I guess I'll just let you cook a little.
We're certainly in uncharted waters, you know, and I do feel like part of my job is to try and step back. You know, I think you and I are probably like-minded in terms of how we look at the world and the things we believe in and the way we connect to domestic politics. But to try and so anything Trumpy from the jump, you know, from the day he rode down the gold-plated escalator, whatever it was, and started his campaign with his initial campaign. Now it's been 10 years thereabouts. You know, entered into public political life on the extent that he did, and you know, I mean, the toothpaste is out of the tube, I guess, right? There's no going back. We can't change things, and you know, there's a lot that I find distasteful and objectionable and occasionally outright, you know, loathsome. But he's here, and I think in the same way that a lot of political pundits talked about, you know, winning one election had a certain sort of one-off nature to it, or maybe like a random event. And then, but winning re-election has legitimized Donald Trump and the movement, and has put it in the mainstream on a different level, whether we like that or not, on an individual level. And I think it reflects in the way that Gianni Infantino and FIFA writ large, and by extension, world soccer, connects to the administration in this country. Like, this is the chief executive. This is the leader of the United States of America, the host nation of the Club World Cup, the primary host nation of next summer's FIFA World Cup. So it's a Trump World Cup. This, and whatever you think of him on a personal or ideological level, he is a necessary part of this process to host these two, and really it's three if you think ahead to the Women's World Cup. These three massive, depending on, you know, whether, even if he's out of office by then, but the whatever happens in the future, like, these are massive logistical undertakings, and it's natural that the governing bodies of these sports that are coming here, and it would be, I think, comparable with the Olympics too, they have to connect with that. And arguably it's even more important when you have someone with this type of personality in the White House, that it's not just enough to connect with this person. You have to have this person and their movement and their administration on side and motivated to make the event succeed just as much as FIFA is, because that's how these things work. And so there is the trophy hoist was again the latest in this string of surreal moments, because, you know, it's already sort of distasteful to a lot of soccer purists that an executive of any form, right, someone who's not a coach or a player, is on the dais for a trophy lift. But once the owners get up there, right, like the sort of the devil's in the door. And now it's like for someone like Donald Trump, that he's part of the show. And I think we see this, the reality show alum that he is, he thinks like a Hollywood producer. It's almost like Simon Cowell or someone like that in terms of his mindset. I thought of this, you know, a few months ago when he first came into office and immediately started a feud with Canada, right? Our neighbors and our oldest allies and everything, and our co-hosts for next summer. And he goes out of his way to start a feud with Canada and its chief and its leadership. And someone asked him and Infantino on a previous junket they did, you know, isn't it, you're starting a trade war with the country that you have to work hand in glove with to host this event next summer. Isn't that a little bit odd? Or and Trump said, well, you know, it adds drama, right? No, I mean, that was his answer. Like, that's how he thinks, right? That we don't know what's going to happen. You know, there's a little bit of drama inserted into this. And it's again, it's hard to sort of get your brain onto anywhere near that wavelength, but I think it's important for trying to kind of contextualize what's happening and why and how, because this is where we're at. And there's still, even if you feel like there's fundamental changes and maybe concerning erosion of norms in our political system, like, this is still the commander in chief. There's still incredible value in for the eyes of a casual or a mainstream person, and particularly a global soccer person coming to the US. It's just natural that that if you can get the president of the US involved in what you're doing, that you would want to do that. So I try to detach myself from these things. It's harder than ever. Right. But that's, there's just, I think we just got to get used to this. Like, this is the Trump World Cup.
It is. And on one hand, I get it from the Infantino perspective, which is, look, his superpower is understanding what he needs to do to get what he wants. And to his credit, I guess, if you want to take this perspective, is he understood that for Trump to buy into this thing, he needed to sort of just like lather him up with every bit of everything that he could, everything from letting him have the Club World Cup trophy just sit in his office, apparently keep like, I think, whether or not it's the real trophy and the one that they presented is a replica, we can sort of,
or vice versa,
yeah. Like, whatever, like, it doesn't, like, I don't know what difference there really is, but he's keeping a Club World Cup. He was essentially given the Club World Cup as a gift, whether or not it's the original or not. I don't know. It's like, it's kind of beside the point, but he believes that he has the original, and Infantino certainly is letting him believe that. And that's sort of,
and listen, we're told that the reason that Jared Kushner provided the recommendation to Infantino to have Tiffany and Co. make the actual hardware. So I'm sure Donald feels like he's part of the process on some level, right? No,
I'm sure he does. And I guess there is an element of like, look, you got to do what you got to do to make this tournament happen. And if that's the cost of doing business, Infantino is, I'm sure. But the thing is, it's also, and I don't want to get into the whole political discussion, but it is a long line of people who think that if they can just butter Trump up enough, that they can sort of get his ear and convince him to maybe change his ways, to loosen in Infantino's, the way it matters to him is he wants to make sure people can actually get into the country to play games and to watch games. And then, we hear about this silly shit, like there's a $250 visitor visitor visa charge if you are coming into like, just like nickel and dime stuff that, what are we doing here? But whatever. I don't want to turn this into a whole political discussion, but it's what's frustrating, I think, is that for a lot of us who do try to have, like, even though we talk about political or whatever non-sports elements on this show, we try to still center it on sports. And the way that Trump has inserted himself into the Club World Cup is just making it so much harder than it's ever been. Like, it's impossible right now to separate these two things. And more than that, do we think that anyone is prepared for what next summer is going to look like? In like the FIFA part, I think we got a good taste of what having a World Cup is going to kind of feel like. We got a sense of the process for getting credentials and getting into the stadium and what the presentation is going to look like and all this kind of stuff. But this is all just a warm up for next summer. This is going to become a totally political event, I think. And it's kind of bumming me out.
Yeah. And I think, well, in trying to contextualize in writing that piece, I dug around and this is not the first time, right? And of course, even younger listeners and readers will know we're touching a lot of the same topics as we did in the run up to 2022 with Qatar, an elaborate sports washing exercise to host the World Cup, and not just host it, but to build, entire neighborhoods and massive stadiums, gorgeous stadiums, spending 200 billion plus overall as the World Cup project to fit into this bigger geopolitical thing. Right. And not only did Gianni Infantino bring FIFA along on that, he moved there himself. Right. And he's apparently, if reports are correct, he's still flying around on a private plane that's Qatari. So, and you could easily argue too that Russia 2018 was worse, that a tyrant in a country that had already sort of destabilized its neighbor Ukraine and then would subsequently declare open war on Ukraine, was using the 2018 World Cup as a sports washing exercise and burnishing its own prestige and providing a sort of the ultimate riposte to anyone who had any complaints about how they do business when it comes to oil, politics, extrajudicial killings, whatever. Right. So, and I had to remind myself too, like going all the way back to 1978 when a pretty brutal military dictatorship was running Argentina and did something very similar in a different era, but nonetheless with a lot of parallels to that World Cup. And, you know, it puts people in a tough spot. And there are occasionally teams or players or individuals within this system that stand up and speak out. I think it was Paul Breitner, if I'm remembering right. Pardon me if I've butchered that, but I think he was a prominent German player who refused to take part in 1978. There was the German national team covering their mouths in the team photo in Qatar, if I'm remembering it right, to make a statement. You know, there's examples that there's always, I think, an opportunity if individuals or groups want to speak out to some extent. It's not easy for them, right? And I think we've seen now that, you know, dissent tends to draw a strong reactions, occasionally brutal reactions here in this country these days. But fundamentally, you know, FIFA sets the norms, and those who are within that system. And if you're a player who wants to play in the World Cup or coach in it or work in it, and that's the peak of the profession, nevertheless, you know, you have to make your own sort of peace with it. And I think we have to do the same as fans. And sometimes it's made easy to go along and get along, and sometimes it's a little more difficult, a little more painful. And I certainly, if I think back sometimes, because 1994, you know, I was an adolescent and went to games in Dallas where I grew up and changed my life. Right. I'm probably sitting here talking to you because of that tournament on some level. And it all seems so innocent, you know, when I look back on what that tournament was like. But, you know, that's where everyone wants to be. And that's, you just, you know, you have to sort of, I think FIFA maybe has always been like this. As much as we feel like it's unprecedented, maybe there's a cyclical aspect to this.
Well, I mean, I think you're right. But I just can't help but think that there's also degrees to which, I mean, I guess maybe we've just never had someone quite as shameless as Trump being catered to. And that's sort of what makes it different. It's not so much FIFA doing anything different. It's the way that Trump has embraced the opportunity, you know, to,
and,
like,
and
I'm
well,
sure
maybe he, I'm sorry to cut you off, but maybe he was watching when Leo Messi raises the World Cup trophy, right? And a traditional Qatari garment is placed over his shoulders.
Yeah.
To literally impose the country on that moment, right?
Sure, I'm sure you're right, but I think there's a difference between even then, which it was gross then. I think a lot of people thought it was gross then too, but that's one thing of it saying like this is our country's World Cup, and then this is Trump saying like, no, this is my World Cup. This literally is the trophy is in my office. It's not the country's office, it's my office. I'm going to stay up here on stage, and you know, it's not as a representative of the United States. It's me. I'm here. This is my thing. But whatever. We don't need to dwell on this too much. I think we probably both ultimately agree that it's whether or not it's degrees. You're right. There is a trade-off that comes with having a FIFA tournament. We were exposed in the most overt way possible to that trade-off, I think. And that was sort of more my point, is that we got a full taste of what the FIFA experience is this last month. But there were some, I think, more, you know, at the same time you put up with it because as soccer fans, there was a lot to like about this tournament. As much as I may or may not want to admit it, there was a lot to be impressed by. Like, I wrote a pretty exhaustive piece where I talked about things that we learned about this tournament, and most of it was good, I think, from a soccer perspective. Like, it was super exciting to see fans from all over the world coming to Seattle and putting on displays of fandom that are different than what we would otherwise see. You got to see some of these games on the other coast. What was your experience in the stadium?
Yeah, and to be fair, so I'm here in DC. DC's 3 games were not were not like A-lister type of games. Although Juventus was the biggest name that came through, and even at that, I mean that game got a little bit overshadowed by what had happened at the White House with the Oval Office junket earlier in the day. But I think there's something here, and it was striking. Even, I mean, I went to the third game, which was a dead rubber between Wydad of Casablanca versus Al Ain. So teams that it was like the worst case scenario. It was a 3:00 start on a 99-degree day in DC on a weekday, with 2 teams that had already been eliminated from contention for the knockout rounds, and yet still I roll out to the stadium and it's absolutely sweltering. There's a reason that DC United does not play day games essentially between Memorial Day and Labor Day, right? It's hot. And yet there's these Wydad fans out there sweating their faces off, but like there's ultras in behind one goal chanting the whole game. There was way more atmosphere than I expected for a essentially meaningless game. And I think that showed you maybe like if that's the floor, and then if a sellout MetLife Stadium, watching 2 of the world's biggest, most popular clubs play with the president of the United freaking States in the house, like that's maybe the ceiling. I mean, that's technically, I think, the first sellout of the tournament, but nonetheless, it was a tough ticket. There's something here. And I think one thing I found myself coming back to a lot as I both watched these games and watched how others watched them and watched what the media coverage was like. The dominant, I think, journalistic voices were Europeans that were coming in large numbers to cover this event, whether they were team media or covering on a meta sense. And they came in with a fair amount of sort of preset agendas, or at least topics, right? The quality of the pitches, the extreme heat, and then all the FIFA political stuff.
No one was paying attention to it.
Right.
The Europeans were going to dominate. What else we got?
Yeah. And what a stain this was on the game in terms of the traditionalist standpoint and so forth. And not that those are without merit, but some of those fizzled when it came to actually like, hold on, for me, it was a moment to say that Eurocentrism is a pretty powerful force in the world, in the global affairs of humans for the last 500-600 years. And it's still here, and it's very much well established in soccer. And this tournament, I thought, exposed a lot of the flaws and some of the arrogance that is behind that, right? So in the end, you have the Europeans, the European giants with the most money and the most clout and established, I guess, power in different, both on and off the pitch, were the ones that were in the final, were dominated the latter knockout rounds, but they got their noses bloodied a bit. I mean, you saw the real stars, I think, as much as anyone on the field, were the South American supporters. And I would even lump in like Wydad, right? A 3-and-out team from I guess a little bit off of the mainstream soccer map, but they were incredible. They showed out, and the players cared, the fans cared. I want to
also just give a shout out real fast, because I feel like there's been a lot of discussion about the great supporters at this thing. And one of the ones I keep not hearing about is Urwa Red Diamonds, who came out in massive, massive numbers for 2 games in Seattle. I don't know how great their showing was in LA. I think it was okay. But like, I thought, like, I like the South American teams, especially like River Plate, had this unbelievable crowd as well. I know the Brazilian teams had great crowds almost everywhere they went. And I think they are understandably the toast of the town when it comes to just the sheer numbers. But I was just blown away at Urwa's coordination, and almost like they traveled with an actual supporters group, like like 3,000 people strong. They all knew the chants. They were highly coordinated and all this kind of stuff. It was just quite a display. Anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to get that in there, because I have seen
absolutely
a bunch of people talking about the great supporters of this thing, and Urwa just feels like they got overlooked. But anyway, go ahead.
But they're another great example of, there's a rich, vibrant footballing culture in Japan, and it doesn't necessarily get the shine that it deserves. just because everything is so overwhelmingly canted towards the European clubs and competitions and leagues. And that's, again, we still know that the best players and the best teams are concentrated on that continent. But I think the reason FIFA's gotten, part of what's gotten this whole project this far, is that FIFA knows that, and they recognize, FIFA UEFA is turning out to be one of the great sort of soccer Cold War, rivalries of our time. And Infantino knows that he can tap into a significant and potent backlash and pride in other parts of the world that, among people and countries and entities that chafe at the sort of dominant and perceived superiority of those countries and those teams. And I think that's something powerful. And that's what makes the World Cup special. It's this, when you can find this sort of, there's this incredible collective, it's patriotism, but sort of defanged from the negative aspects of it. Right. And it's one of the international soccers where we can feel free to support our flag and our country without so much of the baggage. And I know that may be harder for Americans than many countries, and for a variety of reasons. And it goes beyond Donald Trump, but you get that chance to support without so much of the guilt. And in Germany, that was a huge talking point. That's why, arguably, why Jurgen Klinsmann had the aura that he did when he came to the U.S. job, because he was the figurehead of this great distillation of Germanness, right, and German pride. And I think that's what tournaments can do. That's what tournament runs can do. And I think Club World Cup was showing that there's a different flavor that could be really, really meaningful. And so I think that's why we're gonna see and hear a lot more about this, because it's cleverly, I think they've slotted into the calendar as the de facto Confederations Cup replacement, which has a lot of logistical value as a World Cup warm up as well.
Although it will be interesting, because when the next the 26, where's the 30 World Cup? It's in,
oh God, Morocco, right?
Is that right?
Should really know this. Sorry, Morocco, Portugal, and Spain co-hosting, and then they're doing 3 matches in South America for the centenary. So it's a little bit of a Frankenstein, but predominantly, I think originally Morocco.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I would just remember I had this conversation because I had posited that the U.S. makes sense as almost a semi-permanent host for a tournament like this, because we just have the infrastructure to support it. But I was reminded that Portugal, Spain, especially, have plenty of facilities that can support this type of tournament, so it shouldn't be probably won't be an issue. I would imagine it will be kind of, if it goes there, the next one, that would make sense. But one of the things that also jumped out at me about this tournament was how the European press, and especially the English press, I think, were just licking their chops at this being such a massive failure that it would be a one and done type of thing. And I think maybe the biggest takeaway, that it's almost doesn't even feel like a takeaway, because it feels almost like common sense. The idea that this is a one and done tournament is just not based in reality. That, like, this was much more of a success, much less of a failure than it would have needed to have been to not be repeated. I think you can argue that it was a success for a one-off tournament. I mean, for a first of its kind type of tournament. It went there were not sure, like, there's a lot of talk about the percentage of seats that were filled at these games, and there was a lot of rightful criticism of the ticketing process. I would imagine that FIFA made a tiny fraction of what they thought they might make in terms of ticketing revenue, because they botched the pricing and the rollout so badly that I would love to think that this will have ramifications on the way that they price the World Cup, although I think that's probably naive. But at the end of the day, you can say that there was only, half the seats were filled at a lot of these games. There were still like 30 or 40,000 people at most of these games, which is frankly a lot of people to go watch a soccer game in almost any part of the world. There's plenty of World Cups where the games are at facilities that don't fit more people than that anyway. So the fact that, I don't remember, I haven't seen the actual attendance numbers for this thing, but it was well over 1 million people came out to watch these games. that's a lot of people that came out to these games. And we can talk about, again, we can talk about the percentages and we can talk about all the things that FIFA had to do to fill these seats. But if you went to one of these games, chances are it was a pretty good crowd with a pretty good atmosphere.
Yeah, and I having spent way too much time on Gianni Infantino's Instagram over the past couple of weeks, he kept, every time they'd hit a new milestone, it was million. I think they may have been over 2 million. Yeah, so they like his social media team would post when they would pass a new milestone. So they went over 2 million on July 2nd. So we're in the 2 million plus.
Okay,
and
there you go.
You can, that's, again, for something that was widely maligned before this all started as this hideous beast of a boondoggle. Like, it's clearly there. I mean, and I think part of that too is it's the power of the U.S. and the U.S. story, right? Which is that there's expats from every corner of the world here in some numbers. And, I don't think anybody expected that. I think, is it Al Ahly? I think it was the Egyptian team that turned out a huge crowd, like dominated their games at the Meadowlands. And it's like, FIFA didn't even realize how much they might be able to tap into these different groups. And so maybe it's a different challenge, right? Maybe in Morocco and Iberia, it's going to look different in 4 years. Something tells me Gianni will always be drawn back to the States. I mean, it's one thing that they opened a FIFA office in Miami, and now they've gone a step further and opened in Trump Towers. So,
yes,
they're putting down roots here, right? So I suspect he'll be looking for any excuse to put any sort of FIFA events in the U.S. Just because the floor is there. And it's something I posted about this on Blue Sky a couple weeks ago. There's a real monkey's paw phenomenon that I have now as a middle-aged soccer person who, again, watched the 94, always dreamed of like, wow, someday the U.S. will be relevant, right? Someday, if we all work really hard, we can grow the sport in this country enough to be relevant on the global scale. And now we are relevant in all the worst ways, right? In terms of bringing dynamic ticket pricing, and not everybody hates it, but certainly there's a very American sort of Super Bowl flavored hype machine and extravaganza kind of spectacle mentality that's being applied to this tournament in particular. And I think will be the new normal going forward for World Cup as well, because Infantino in particular and people on his tier in general, they see how well American professional sports has commodified their product, and they want to learn and they want to apply that to soccer. And it's not a perfect fit. There'll always be a push-pull there, but for sure, U.S. sports and U.S. capitalism is influencing global soccer in ways that we've never seen before.
Yeah, and you say like for better or for worse. Yeah, like it or not, for better or for worse, it is kind of where we are. I guess I'll close this segment, and I'm not going to ask you if you think this was a success or a failure, but I do want to know if you came away. How did this line up with your expectations of the tournament? Was it? Yeah, I'll just leave it open like that.
I think overall, it surpassed my expectations because one. So I approach it too from inevitably as detached as I try to be from stuff just for analytical reasons. Like, I was very interested in seeing how, in general, non-European and non-South American clubs did and how they performed on the field. Specifically, the MLS and North American teams, most specifically, because that's the ones that I watch the most and spend the most time on and around. And then also how the actual product, the tournament as a product, and how it would connect with the marketplace and with our soccer communities. And I have to say, like, I think it could have gone a whole lot worse. And I didn't necessarily have an idea of what the best case scenario was, but it has to be on the upside, pushing the upside, just because, and also even, since you and I and Richard recorded that pod a month or so ago in the lead up, I think we spent a good amount of time, whether it was on or off mic, talking about how shambolic the ticket sales had been up to that point. But then even in the final days, right, and during the tournament, FIFA clearly seemed to try to be learning from their mistakes and adapting and trying to get butts in seats. And they succeeded, I think, maybe more so than their initial missteps would have indicated that they would be. And I do think they have a decision to make, which is, they're trying to have their cake and eat it too, in terms of both maximize the event as a spectator attendance event, meaning have the biggest crowds and make the most money off tickets, while still building everything around centering the European television audience, which is the biggest density of viewers, right? But I think you have to decide if you're going to take this product seriously or take this tournament seriously as a competition. Like, you can't be having games at high noon in a North American heat wave just so that extra people will watch in Europe on television to be in prime time and so forth. Like decide which it's going to be. And if they had decided from the jump, maybe been a little bit less avaricious, like maybe you could have had dirt cheap tickets, try to sell out every game at every venue, and then know that you're going to get it back in a different situation. Right. I think now that these events are so big, the climate and time zone realities are so complex. I think you've got to decide at some point, okay, like if we're going to make someone sit out in the sun at noon, like we need to adapt our ticket pricing approach. And we're already seeing, right, the game is adapting in terms of the cooling breaks. And I think there's a whole other conversation to be had about how adapting soccer as we know it to these conditions, which are only going to get worse with climate change, right?
Yeah, they said something about how only stadiums that had roofs would host afternoon games didn't they make some statement about that? And
I think there's
doesn't make
been
any
something
sense. Honestly, it didn't make any sense to me,
days.
But yeah. But and I will say that, on the ticketing thing, FIFA does get some credit for doing something that so few, MLS teams or most American teams would do, which is you see that the audience is not buying at your preferred price point, and so you start flooding the market with much cheaper tickets. We saw it here. We saw tickets that, and it was very frustrating for fans, and I get it. Like, I if I'm a fan and I paid $500 and then found out that I could have got that same ticket for $50, I'm going to be pissed off. But FIFA also is the circus. They come into town and they leave, and so are you going to not buy tickets for the World Cup next summer? They're certainly betting that's not the case, right? So they maybe have the ability to do that teams who have to sell tickets to the same audience 20 times a year and potentially for a lot longer than that. So they have some flexibility that local teams don't have, but I suppose they do deserve some credit for realizing that people were not going to pay premium ticket prices for an event that wasn't yet proven as a premium event, and then they started pricing it more accordingly. But I would also agree with you that whatever the worst case scenario was and whatever the best case scenario, this was probably a much closer to the best case scenario, especially for the MLS teams. I did find it funny that how many people came out after Miami lost to PSG saying, and like I was shocked at how many credulous headlines I saw that were something along the lines of MLS saw how far they have to go, as if that was a mystery. Like, did we in any world did we really think that Miami was going to stand toe to toe with PSG? Like, we had a good time with the Sounders losing 2-0 to PSG, but I think we all knew in our hearts that the gap in talent was vast. Like, we didn't need that game to prove that PSG was better. We didn't need, and I think having one MLS team get out of the group and win a, that a MLS team did win a game in this thing, that was probably about best case scenario. I don't know that many people would have really plausibly predicted a better showing, right?
Well, it was sort of like, a decade or 2 decades worth of Conca Champions lessons all distilled into one month with supercharge with not just the elite of Liga MX dealing out harsh lessons, but now it was the elite of UEFA Champions League, right? I mean, we've known for a long time now, because so much of MLS and North American sports in general is sort of a bubble, right? It's such a distinct environment here, and we have our own championships and we have our own gravity. But the CONCACAF Champions Cup / Champions League is the definitive measuring stick, right? You cannot right. escape those results, especially when you look at them in mass. And I think the Club World Cup is another one. And if you've been following, if you're an MLS sicko in particular, or people like us who are immersed in this league, the fundamental outlines are the same. You're fundamentally the MLS salary regulations, which have a sensible principles in mind, right? It's making your money go farther, creating the most balanced domestic competition you can. So without getting fully into the weeds on that, you when you go up against a team that has spent as much on its right back as you have spent on your top 3 attacking players, right? That's going to show, right? And there's always we talk about soccer as a weak link game. When there's 11 bodies on on each side on the pitch, like the best teams and the best coaches will always find the weak links. And for the most part, I mean, Seattle's case in particular, I thought the midfield was excellent for long stretches. The defense was pretty reliable, more so than we thought for long stretches. But it's the chances were created in the final third, but they were not finished clinically, right? And if you had a clinical finisher on the scale of what PSG or Atletico has in front of goal for some of those chances that the Sounders created, maybe it's a different story. But that is the price premium on the global market. That's why MLS limits that kind of spending to 3 spots, essentially, right? In short,
right.
3 spots per roster instead of 12, 13, 14, 15, 18 spots per roster. So it's money, and it's not necessarily, we see this all over the country, all over the world, right? And the data people will tell you, look at wages. Everything always comes back to wages, right? And teams can pull off upsets, and there's incredible stuff that happens. We haven't even talked about Auckland, the semi-pros of this tournament, the team that's
getting a result,
getting a draw against one of South America's giants. I mean, that's absolutely incredible. So soccer can serve that up for us, but over the bigger sample size, the wages that you're investing to draw the top talent is so often so indicative.
Yeah. And I think one of the, this is going to get us sidetracked, but I will say, I think one of the things that people get messed up with in MLS is that there's this kind of long standing belief that you can't buy wins in MLS the way you can buy wins in other leagues. And there is some truth to that. But the bigger reality is that the gap between the most expensive teams and the least spending teams is just not big enough or certainly there's not enough stratification in the way that teams spend to really show up in performance. Like that's what really is the differentiating factor. It's not that money doesn't make a difference. Is that there's not enough ways to stratify the league based on money alone. And that's what keeps MLS from being sort of the same as all these other leagues. But that's something we can get into some other time. I want to take a break, and I do want to talk to you a little bit about the state of the MLS season. This is sort of the part of the week where we do our How the West Will Be Won segment. So I want to come back and talk to you a little bit about the Western Conference, get your thoughts on a few things, because we do think there are some stuff going on in the MLS world. But thank you, Charlie, so much for talking Club World Cup with us, and we'll be right back.
Thank you for listening to the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, which now includes No Sarietes, Lobbing Scorchers, and the Cooler Guild. We've been independent since August of 2023, but need your support to make sure it continues. Although this podcast is free, it's only made possible by your continued support. Memberships start as low as $25 a year, which not only helps make podcasts like this one happen, but also gets you access to everything we produce. If you're able to support us at higher levels, starting at $75 a year, you gain access to a host of other perks, most notably entry into our members-only Discord, where the smartest, funniest, and most engaged commenters share their thoughts and ideas. To find out more, just visit sounderatheart.com and click the subscribe button in the top right corner. Thanks for listening.
No Sarietes, admittedly, is not exactly known for our spicy takes, but that doesn't mean we want our food to be mild. Spice up your life with Hacks and Ferments. Handcrafted in Georgetown and made with the best local ingredients from across the Pacific Northwest, they specialize in unique small batch fermented hot sauces and vinegars. Haxon Ferments brings bold flavors and natural fermentation together for something truly special. Whether you're a heat seeker or just looking to elevate your cooking, you'll find something you love at haxonferments.com. That's HAXANFERMENTS.com. And right now, if you use the code SOUNDERATHEART, that's all one word, at checkout, you will get a free hot sauce with your order. Again, go to haxonferments.com, use the code SOUNDERATHEART at checkout for a free hot sauce with your order. Haxon Ferments is a proud sponsor of the Sounder at Heart podcast network. Welcome back to Nos Arietes. I'm here with Charlie Boehm, and we are going to do a little mini How the West Will Be Won segment, talking about the Western Conference and the MLS. This was another sort of pivotal weekend, and it seems like maybe we're getting some crashing back to earth, some other movements. Let's start at the top, though. San Diego is now leading the Western Conference. They really do look like they're for real. I mean, they keep passing all these little tests. I don't know. Is there any big takeaways you have from them right now? Like I don't know. They keep impressing me.
Yeah, I will say the rate at which they're scoring goals, and this is a team like everybody. There was a lot of a fair amount of debate, I guess I should say, or speculation about, do they have enough, right? They've always been built on this idea of these two kind of complementary wingers. And that's where they are spending the most money with Dreyer and Chucky Lozano. And then, but like, can that work? Like, do they need to go get a number 9 to be the spearhead for everything? Is this all going to, shake out? And that's even, before you even get to the bigger sort of ideological questions about, can you play this pretty soccer all season throughout an expansion season and, not get kicked in the face repeatedly and exploited for your idealism? Well, I mean, here we are. It's July is half over. They're at the top of the table. They score goals for fun. Yes, they
46 goals. 46 goals for 22 games. That's outrageous.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's not the kind of thing you see. It's just not a typical expansion story, right? I mean, that's typically the hardest thing to do. And again, there's been so many moments where they had a little dip in late spring. There's been these occasions where you think, all right, surely the honeymoon is going to end, right? The shine's going to come off it. And even if they completely crater now, I think it would be very difficult for them to miss the playoffs. Playoffs is sort of the basic pass or fail, I think, for every team, but it's particularly expansion teams. And they're fun to watch. And I think the identity question is so important. Like, and I get into this about, I come back to this about Philly a lot, right? Like Philadelphia Union, their fans gripe about not enough spending. There's a sense that their ambition is limited. They don't go out and splash on designated players. But what I come back to with them over and over is their identity is so clear. Their self-knowledge is so deeply dyed into the wool of the culture and the organization. And I think you're seeing that with such a new entity, had, not a lower division team that's making the promotion, quote unquote promotion, like as is so often the case in the past with the expansion stories. They've just built something from scratch that seems to have legs. And I think we're only in the early phases here, because the plan, and starting next month, they're going to matriculate their first class of academy kids in a fully residential program that I think, strictly in terms of infrastructure from the jump, is in the MLS elite for youth development. And that's where they plan to be, sort of that's their foundation long-term. And they've already built something really impressive, and they're doing it in a lot of cases. Like, some of their best players are youth prospects from other clubs that didn't make the grade, or weren't believed in, or hadn't earned the faith of their coaches in, LAFC and San Jose and places like that. So big shouts to Mike Yavaras and Tyler Heaps for what they've done.
Yeah, they're on pace to go over 70 goals. That is a mark that I believe only a handful of teams have ever hit. Now, it happened twice last year, Crew and Miami, but like, it's 70 goals is not a easily achievable mark. I mean, 2 goals a game is not an easily achievable mark in MLS. It doesn't happen every year, and they are currently on pace to blow past that. And it is, they are overshooting their XG by some, but not an outrageous amount. Like they are, I think, 3rd in the league in XG, and they just are. It's not smoke and mirrors. I think that's the thing, is that that's what's kind of scary about this, is that, winning, beating the Chicago Fire is not a huge deal, I suppose, but winning a road game against an Eastern Conference team is just not a easy ask for any, I don't think any Western Conference team plays the Chicago Fire right now and thinks, oh, this is definitely a win. And they're getting a shocking number of those types of wins where it's like, okay, that itself is not in a vacuum super impressive, but you stack this up against all the other wins that they're getting, and it's like, yeah, this is maybe a for real team here.
They've won 7 road games. They're 7-4 on the road, and there's only one other team. Cincy is 7-4-1, and Cincy is just at a fundamentally different stage in their cycle, right? With established players and established organizational expectations. So yeah, it really is remarkable. I do think, the test is going to be, you can have a great regular season, and then the playoffs are a whole new ball game, right? So that it could all fizzle when fall comes. But and I have to say too, my buddy Pablo Maurer was out in San Diego last week and caught the Houston game, and he said the vibe in the stadium was great too. They seem to have done a pretty good job with creating space for a good supporters culture to take root. They had an issue with El Grito, the homophobic chant, or in the first game or two. They stamped that out. It seems to have been dealt with. A lot of good things, a lot of really promising stuff happening down there.
Yeah, and I could be wrong about this, but I think LAFC in 2018 has the record for most road wins for an expansion team. They had 7.
Ooh, that's a deep cut, Jeremiah. I'm impressed if you can summon that.
I'm pretty sure, because I feel like I remember here at the time, at least, that was the record. And I mean, they certainly have the record for most points for an expansion team, 57. I believe that was not. Right. I don't think.
There you go.
I don't think St. Louis beat that when they won. I know St. Louis was the first one to win their conference, but this could be a real historic season for them, and it might already be. I'm going to have to double check on that, but impressive stuff either way. And Minnesota United is now the 2nd place team in the Western Conference. They're doing it in like the exact, maybe not exact opposite way, but in a very different way. They keep, I talked to Matt about this a couple weeks ago, Matt Doyle, about how they can't keep getting away with this type of thing with the way that they play. And yet here they are getting away with
it. They can
every week.
Yes, it's working. It's working. Hey, let me pause for just a sec, Jeremiah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you good? Okay, thanks.
So yeah, speaking of teams who just can't seem to, we keep thinking are going to fall on their face, or at least I keep thinking are going to fall on our face. I talked to Matt Doyle about this last week or a couple weeks ago when he was on, about how Minnesota United, who's doing it in a very different style, it does, but in very much they can't keep getting away with it. Like I think San Diego is making believers out of a lot of us. Minnesota United continues to baffle us, I think. But here they are. They get a 4-1 win over San Jose, a San Jose team that has been more than respectable. They led this game 3-0. They are doing it sort of the way they are always doing it. It seems they don't need a whole lot of possession. They only had 42% in this game, although for them 42% is a lot. But they get great chances. They don't need to have the ball a lot. And at some point, I still feel like that might catch up with them, but it's nowhere near catching up with them right now, it seems.
And all season, it feels like we've been talking about how they, and I think Matt has written about this repeatedly, and he has a point.
Yes.
He feels they do need to add another club to the bag when they get into high leverage situations in a knockout setting. You need to have alternatives. And I agree with him on that in principle. but there is an if it isn't broke, don't fix it element to what they're doing right now. Because again, talking about identity and self-knowledge, like that everyone's role is so clear. The players are clearly bought into what they do. They know it works. Increasingly now we're in mid-July. Everyone knows what's coming, right? You know what you're going to get from the Loons, but stopping it is a whole other matter. I mean, in the way John Mueller did a great piece for the Guardian a few days ago about the absolutely historic scale of their set piece prowess. I mean, they are so dominant. They're so aggressive with set pieces, and we have to count long throw-ins as a set piece, because if they get a throw in within 30, 40 meters of the opposition's goal, Michael Boxall, I think it is, going to go up there and put it in the danger area. And they've clearly spent tons of time on the training ground to be dangerous on restarts, and nobody's stopping them. I mean, you've got to do your homework and then execute in the moment. And they were talking about, I guess the ritual at Allianz Field when they get a corner kick is, the fans stand up and wave their scarves and try and build that hype. It's sort of like reminiscent of when, Timber Joe is revving the chainsaw, right? And you try and build that sense of intimidation factor and anticipation. And I think they're talking about doing the same process with these attacking throw-ins, and why not? Because it's remarkably effective.
It is remarkably effective. I know it was on display here when the Sounders lost to Minnesota right before the Club World Cup, and yeah, they're sitting now. I believe they set a club record for points at this point in the season for them. They're sitting on, I think, 40 points through 22 matches, and that is, this is a team who, when it wasn't that long ago that this team seemed to be just like a sort of like falling apart, and here they are, right there in the Supporters Shield race with 37% of possession.
Yeah, and I mean, so it helps a ton too that they have, I think we can say, two elite strikers. I mean, Tony Olashey and Kelvin Ubo are a great pair. I always love it when there's still a place in the game for the striker duo. Right. And that's with so many, with the 4-2-3-1 becoming so dominant and so many derivations of tactical derivations with a single striker, a low number 9. It's fun that they are they're not the only ones. The Quakes do this too. And there's a few other examples around the league. Philly believe in the strike partnership. When you get two guys who can work together and then you build a team behind them, however, you need to, whether 3 in the back, 5 in the back, whatever, however you figure out, how everything's going to work in total. But those are two really great strikers who don't need a lot of touches. They don't need volume. They understand one another well. They're so fun to watch in transition. I mean, they don't need a volume of chances. But they're really crisp. Their understanding of movement and combination play. It's cool. As for being what we would call, I guess, reactive soccer rather than proactive. I think it's actually more enjoyable to watch maybe than we give them credit for.
Absolutely. So a team that seems to be going the other way, though, and maybe this is, we can chalk this up to being a little predictable as well, is Vancouver just is coming off a 3-0 loss to the Rapids. They seem to be in a little bit of a tailspin. They had that win over the Sounders, but other than that, they have been really struggling to find results recently. And I suppose they're still dealing with some absences from the Gold Cup. I don't. Oh no, I guess no. It looks like most of their guys were back this week. But they're now coming off consecutive 3-0 losses, having lost 3-0 to the Galaxy last week. They've now lost 4 or 5. Their defense is suddenly leaking goals like crazy. Although they do have a random 1-0 win over LAFC in between. The one win they have in their last 5 is over LAFC, one of the hottest teams in the league right now. So it's like, I don't want to totally write them off, but there have to be pretty, and it should also be said, they've played some good teams in this stretch. They lost to the Crew, they lost to San Diego, they beat LAFC, and then of course they lost to the mighty Galaxy. But how worried should people be about a White? Like how loud are the alarm bells at this point?
Well, and then it's starting to look like death by a thousand small cuts, because just a little before we started recording, there was a new batch of reports out of Vancouver about Pedro Vite, who's been massive for them, right? Maybe their most versatile player, most well-rounded player. I think Manny Veth said 90%. He's hearing 90% completed deal to sell him to Pumas in Mexico. So that would be a big loss and not a lot of time to find a replacement on the transfer market.
Really, let's be real. Like Vancouver has never been a team that moves quickly to fill that kind of absence. Like that would be pretty remarkable if they filled that, I think.
I mean, I think he just signed a new contract earlier this year, if I remember correctly. And I would imagine the deal is good enough. Like they're signing off on this midseason deal with multiple trophies, right? Because they also got their act together enough to get past their CPL challenger. I think it was Valor. I think they edged out,
right, yes.
got pushed hard, but advanced in the Canadian Championship. So with multiple trophies still within reach, I'm sure that they were not eager or excited to let a midfield linchpin go, but the money is good enough, and that tells me that hopefully they'll get to reinvest a good chunk of that transfer fee, whatever it turns out to be. But the CCC hangover, which we so often saw, or the CCC toll, maybe is a better general way to phrase it. It's so hard to compete on multiple fronts. It's so no one had ever did what they did to be in the Supporters Shield race while reaching the Conca Champions final. And I remember, I mean, when there was a fair amount of, I guess, second guessing or questioning this, their decision or the league's decision from what Jesper Sorensen said. The league didn't let them move the midweek game they had against Minnesota the Wednesday before.
I thought they said they
Conca
wanted
Champions
to play that game.
Well, that's what they have. They have said. Now we've gotten two different. And again, I haven't revisited this. It's been a month and a half now. But if I'm remembering correctly, Axel Schuster was telling anyone who listened. He went on the AFTN podcast. He told a group of reporters, including me, down in Mexico City around the time of the final, that their data was telling them, both the results on the pitch and the physical data they had, was that their players were performing at a higher level on multi-game weeks. So whatever it was happening with their training regimen and their periodization, they were happy to be playing that game with the midweek, because that was where they're getting better results. And it's sort of like strains credulity, right? It doesn't seem possible, but when you look at the record, that was exactly what was happening. I mean, he wasn't making that up. Like, they were getting better results when they played in midweek. But then I think subsequently it was pointed out to me that Sorensen had said he would have preferred to move that game. I don't know the internal politics, whether they went to the mat to try and get MLS to move it or not. There's internal stuff there that we can only guess at, short of further reporting or further statements that are made on the record in public. But I kind of felt like I needed to reflect Axel's voice, because he was saying this so clearly. And I said, well, they must know what they're doing, because they're doing something that no one's ever done, right? I mean, no one had done this. I mean, you know as well as anyone, right? That incredible Sounders Conca Champions run was at the direct cost of league results. I mean, they ultimately never recovered from having to prioritize CCC. So, but now I think maybe the timeline has just been different for the Whitecaps. Maybe the wall that they hit just arrived at a different period than it does for a lot of the other teams that go on these deep runs, because it's Matt Doyle, alluded to it in his weekend wrap. There's, kind of that 5 to 10% phenomenon where if everybody just is that little bit off the pace from where they were in the spring, that can have such a holistic effect, and it can have a cascading effect, right? My hope is that they can find a way to stop the bleeding here by one. They still miss Gauld. Ryan Gauld still hasn't been back. We thought he might be back by the end of May. Here we are in mid-July. I don't know what's going on. I haven't seen reporting.
Well, the last thing I heard made it sound like they really don't know. Like they're like it to me read almost like he might be done they might have shut him down for the year, but that, I don't know. That's maybe, I'm sure I'm talking.
I certainly hope not, because that would be a brutal development for them. But it's, again, we're weeks past what his original stated recovery timeline was. And that's still their best player and highest paid player. And then if, I think they've got to go out in the market. And we know that they're not necessarily known as that kind of club for the most part, save for the, when they were flush with the Alphonso Davies payday. So, but this is the time, because I still think they've shown so much. But they need bodies. They need help. I mean, doing without Berhalter and White was, for the Gold Cup, I think was really costly. Losing Sam Adekugbe to a season-ending injury was also brutal for them. I mean, that's a key piece that has essentially hardly played at all this year. So it's a tough spot for Schuster and the executive level people in Vancouver, because they don't generally get a ton to spend, and they've raised everyone's expectations now. But that's the deal. I mean, it's close. Like, I still think what Sorensen has done is really impressive, and I think they can contend, but they need more depth.
Yeah, they've already played 32 games this year. That's the most in MLS, even though that's without obviously Club World Cup, but that's, a result of playing through, going deep in CONCACAF and being deep in Canadian Championship. I guess they get a little bit of they're not in Leagues Cup, so they get a little bit of a push there. So they might not end up with too many. Like, I didn't realize they played 48 games last year. So this is a team that's used to playing quite a few games. But yeah, they've played one more game than Miami right now, who has the second most games played. So it's, we'll see how it goes. But I would say, if there's one team I feel like the Sounders might be able to catch right now, Whitecaps might be it. But then behind them, LAFC keeps surging ahead. They got another good win this weekend. They beat up on Colorado at midweek. LAFC looking like the LAFC we thought they were, I suppose, is a way of putting it.
Yeah, I think there's still a pretty high floor when you look at the accumulation of talent they have. John Thornton is a clever roster builder. They did now. I don't think they've done any official announcements, but Aaron Long got hurt their last time out, and from all accounts, it was a non-contact, and looks like pretty serious injury. So I'm expecting that we'll probably hear results of or hear confirmation that he's out for the year, which is a big hit. But they've gotten Kosi Tafari waiting in the wings, so it's an opportunity for him to step up. I mean, it's a well-constructed roster. Everything is always crystallized in modern LAFC for the last year or three about Steve Cherundolo's game model, and is he limiting this team with such a cautious, transition-centered, defensive-oriented outlook? Some of my colleagues feel very strongly about this, that they should have a lot more hardware in the cabinet, given what they've spent and how well they've built these rosters. But then when you watch them on the week-to-week basis, like these last couple of games, everyone knows that everything revolves around Dennis Bouanga right now. And they have Nathan Ordaz as a homegrown kid who's made big strides, made huge steps. I mean, I think he's possibly the most improved young player in the league this season. Who's helped out a lot. But considering that, Olivier Giroud was a bust and just went back to France, having completely failed to settle on or off the pitch, given that they've just taken a substantial L in that sense, they're 9-5-5, and you've got to be really good, really disciplined and organized on an individual and collective level for 90 minutes to get a result against LAFC. I mean, Bouanga he's still a terror. I mean, when he's having a good night, he's almost unplayable for any one defender. You have to get numbers around him, and then there's a cascading series of consequences if you double or triple him or help out his fullback, then spaces open up elsewhere, and they know how to exploit it. So certainly, the Cherundolo era, I think, has a little bit of haze around it as to how this is all going to end, but they're a difficult proposition.
Yeah, they have one loss in their last 12 league games, which is pretty remarkable run. I believe I'm sure they're the best team in that stretch of time. They are looking like a force to be reckoned with. They, of course, I'm sure they're going to go out and sign a DP, because that is unlike, I was kind of joking about Vancouver is not historically a team that is able to sort of get their ducks in a row and sign DPs quickly. LAFC does not have that problem. It seems like they are always able to make a signing whenever they need one. they scrounge together the money that they need. Although the guy they signed for the Club World Cup, has he played for them yet?
Yeah, Dilrosun, and I think he scored. Scored or had a goal contribution last time out. I'll double check on that. But important to also know too, like Miami, they have games in hand because of Club World Cup. So they've only played 19 games, and everyone around them has played 21 to 23 games. Yeah. So good time for them to be getting back in form.
It is. Well, I've kept you for long enough. We've gone through the teams that I think are at this point contenders, and yeah, you'll notice that I left out a team who is technically tied with the Sounders on points, but we don't need to talk about them right now. So we didn't talk about the Sounders either. We didn't talk about the Sounders either.
Can I hold on? Actually, we do have to talk about something. This is important, and I hate to put you on the spot.
No, please.
Is it time to talk about Nuhu?
Oh, sure. I assume we'll have a lot of time for Nuhu on other shows this week, but yeah, that's a good. It's a problem. I would say that Nuhu is now I've been someone who's been willing to put up with a lot when it comes to Nuhu over the years. I understand his offensive limitations, and he's always been a good defensive player, even if he was sometimes prone to mental defensive lapses. But the last month or so is like a new level of sort of chaos that I don't know that, because my concern with Nuhu is if you can't trust a guy to be unminded for a couple minutes while a review is happening, and you need to have him babysit so closely to keep him from doing something like just throwing a ball into the stands. I don't know when you can trust him. This is his third sort of like mental. And I know there's a lot of people in the Sounders community that are saying like, look, he's made some mistakes, but why aren't we beating up on Reed Baker Whiting for that penalty? And he got sent off last game, or no one's beating up on Kalani Kosa Rienzi for getting a second yellow card and getting thrown off. And it's like, okay, fair enough, I suppose. But these are soccer mistakes that these guys are making. Nuhu is making non-soccer mistakes. That's where I think you draw the line of saying, what can we deal with? And when you can't trust a player's it's one thing if you think a player might go in for a rash challenge and you go, oh man, I'd like to believe that you could avoid that. But sometimes we're trying to make a play and we get caught up in it. This is not a player who's trying to make a play. This is a guy who has just lost his cool. And I don't know how he makes it back from this one, to be honest with you. It's going to be.
I have such a soft spot for him because in general, I'm a sucker for cult heroes, and he's undoubtedly earned that distinction. And just a great personality, and it's been interesting to watch from a distance what feels like a tipping point in sort of how the at least the hardcore supporters, the ones who are posting the most on social media, maybe I'm giving excessive weight to that.
I do think that there's been I do think that there's been sort of a tipping point here where a lot of people who sort of just laugh and shrug their shoulders at Nuhu being Nuhu, and it's like, if this was an isolated incident, you'd say like, well, what are you going to do? I mean, there's always been these reports of him doing stuff off the field that you're sometimes a little worried about, but you sort of put up with as long as he's, and the funny thing is that this year you almost wonder if a lot of the other stuff has gotten to his head. Like he did this video with Kenji Alt Lopez, who is a big food influencer, where
the teriyaki video.
Teriyaki video. He did this teriyaki video, and you almost wonder is that kind of stuff getting to his head? He had, he scored a goal for like just the second time in his career, and you kind of wonder like, did that get to his? It's like these little things where it's like they shouldn't matter, but maybe they do, and it's all a little concerning. I would be shocked if he's just sort of welcomed back into the fold immediately. Like I assume he's going to get at least a 2-game suspension. I would be shocked and frankly disappointed if he's starting as soon as he's eligible. If he's playing, frankly, like I feel like there has to be some. There has to, like, I don't know. I don't even know what you say. Like, what do you say to a guy? Like, you can't throw the ball at fans? What are you supposed to tell a player in that situation?
I mean, maybe there's more will come to light about that. Maybe he'll get a chance to explain himself. Certainly looks like a challenge for Brian Schmetzer. And although I will say too, these kind of, it seems like recurringly these kind of challenges get dropped in Schmetzer's lap, and he very often figures it out, and I think it was last year when they came through DC, and he sat down with me for the better part of an hour and in a one-on-one interview, and just great. Just, I mean, you guys listeners know better than I do what a special character Brian Schmetzer is, and things were going pretty bad at that point, and he said, I've got to fix it, and he was fully cognizant and open about the being aware of the consequences, right? Nobody's spot is guaranteed. And he seems to find the right notes at the right times more often than not. So, but some work to do for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I just don't know how many times a player getting red carded twice in 3 games is just hard to do. Like I don't know how many times that's happened. The Sounders have 4
statistical
red cards.
Outlier for sure.
Yeah. Sounders have 4 red cards in 4 straight games, and they've managed to get results in 3 of those, which is also kind of a remarkable little stat.
Very impressive. Yeah.
But anyway, well, Charlie, thank you for doing this. Of course, I really do appreciate all the work you put in helping us with our Club World Cup coverage. Hopefully, people read your essay that came out on Sunday right before the game. But also, hopefully people are reading you over at MLS Soccer and following you on Blue Sky. Anything else you want to plug?
No, I think that's that. Yeah, it was such a pleasure to get a couple of Sounder at Heart bylines. I hope everybody clicks on them. Hope people are buying lots of houses from your sister. Hopefully the Club World Cup, the Club World Cup bump is they're moving units over there, and making the housing market that much hotter in the Puget Sound region. And I don't know, maybe I'm going to try and talk you into a few more bylines now and again. Maybe
we're really definitely open to that.
If I really play my cards right, but it's been a pleasure. And I hope I can get back there I've still only done one Sounders game at Lumen Field in my life, which feels short, feels a little short. So I hope I get a chance to go back soon. Yeah.
All right, man. Well, we'll catch you later. I am Jeremiah Shan. This is No Sadietes, and we will catch you next time.
I expect a LAFC who's motivated to prove themselves at home, to prove to their fans that they're capable of winning in this league. And it's up to us to really brew in the party.
I feel a lot better than Bob.